Hello everybody, I am Jarrett Ross, the GeneaVlogger, and on today's video, we're going to be diving into my DNA test results. Some new ones from MyHeritage, and then some old ones from FTDNA and 23andMe, and we're going to compare them all. But before we get to any of that, let's first break down what I'm going to expect based on what I know of my ancestral breakdown. So if we look at my ancestral breakdown very simply, I have about 87.75% of my DNA coming from an Eastern European Ashkenazi Jewish ancestry. So basically an ancestry coming from what was known as the Pale of Settlement. Then I have about 7% of my DNA coming from a Sephardic ancestry, and about 5.25% of my DNA coming from a Dutch Ashkenazi ancestry. But we can also break things down further. So I have about 12.5% Romanian Jewish, 12.5% of unknown ancestry, which is likely from the Pale of Settlement, 12.5% coming from Litvak Polish Jewish ancestry, then 31.25% coming from a Ukrainian ancestry, which can also be broken down to 12.5% coming from Vinnytsia Oblast, 6.25% coming from Odessa Oblast, and 12.5% coming from the Kyiv Oblast. Then I have about 12.5% Belarusian Jewish ancestry, with 6.25% coming from Hrodno and 6.25% coming from Vasilishki. And then I have 6.25% Moldovan Jewish, and then the other breakdowns we already saw of 7% Sephardic and 5.25% Dutch Ashkenazi. So I have a really good idea of my ancestry, with only about 12.5% of that ancestry being a little unknown, but still likely coming from the Pale of Settlement. So with all that, now let's jump into the results. So as you can see on my page, I have done two different kits with MyHeritage. One that was originally through Family Tree DNA and then uploaded to MyHeritage, and then one that's just from MyHeritage. So starting out, we're just getting 50.8% Ashkenazi Jewish USSR, 26% Ashkenazi Jewish Germany, France, and the Netherlands, which we can see is this orange one, so a bit more Western European in terms of the Ashkenazi Jewish, likely correlating to my Dutch Ashkenazi and Dutch Sephardi. And then lastly, we have this 23.2% Ashkenazi Jewish, Poland, Hungary, Romania, Czechia, which is right in the middle. So we kind of get three Ashkenazi Jewish readings. We have one which is USSR, so that's pretty much going to be Pale of Settlement sort of stuff. Then we have this Ashkenazi Jewish, Poland, Hungary, Romania, Czechia, which is largely going to be a lot of the Jews that were in more of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, I think, although still could apply to a lot of the Jews that were in the Poland area, which, knowing that I have a lot of ancestry in the Litvak sort of area, so Lithuania, Poland, kind of corridor, kind of including Belarus a little bit as well, that's probably where that's falling in as well. And then that Western one being that Dutch sort of Jewish ancestry, but even though it says Ashkenazi here, it's very likely incorporating my Sephardic ancestry in it as well. Now for genetic groups, we have Eastern and Central Europe, mostly Poland, Germany, Ukraine, Lithuania, Belarus, and Russia, which kind of covers all three. So you see that it's going into the Western portion, the Eastern portion, and covering all of the Central portion. Then for the other genetic group, we have this one, Poland, Ukraine, Russia, and Romania. And then we have this third genetic group that seems to not be coming up in my list for some reason, but Poland, Hungary, Germany, and Austria. But the main thing that you can kind of see here, especially with the genetic groups, is they're all largely just overlapping each other with just a little bit of a hint like, okay, so this one's probably leaning a bit more in here, and maybe that represents my Dutch ancestry, because we see that here. But then also, we see over to the west, we have this Poland, Ukraine, Russia, Romania, which maybe that's representative of my Ukrainian, Romanian, Ashkenazi ancestry, but it's still pretty far into Poland and Belarus, so maybe it's got to deal with that as well. But I think the big thing we can see here is that, unfortunately, nothing that you're going to really be able to get out of this in terms of taking this test and trying to figure out genealogically, where is my family coming from? All this would tell someone, if they had no clue about any of their ancestry, is, well, yeah, I'm Jewish, and I guess maybe they're coming from more than one place. Now, one thing that people may have noticed is they have this confidence level. So when you make the confidence really high, it's going to tell you what's the highest confidence sort of stuff. and then medium confidence, a little less, and then the low confidence. But when I click through, the thing I noticed for my new results is there's literally no change other than in the genetic groups. And so that genetic group that I was like, why is that not popping up before? Well, that's part of the low. And then it seemed to show that there's even another one in there, but that's still overlapping a lot of the same areas. Now, when we look back at the version 0.95 for me in the family tree DNA kit, it's actually kind of interesting because I have this 84.6% Ashkenazi Jewish, which is actually quite close to what I was expecting in terms of the Eastern European Ashkenazi of 87.75%, and that's a perfect breakdown if it is. But then my Sephardic Jewish, which is only North African, is 9.7%. But obviously my Sephardic ancestry is not coming from North Africa. My Sephardic ancestry is coming through the Western Sephardic Jewish diaspora, which is a separate wave than the North African one. So there's three main waves: Eastern Sephardic Jews, North African Sephardic Jews, and Western Sephardic Jews, and I descend from the Western Sephardic Jews. Then lastly, there's this 5.7% Mizrahi Jewish, which really doesn't make any sense with what I know about my family, but there is that big 15% that I don't fully know. I just assume it's from the Pale of Settlement, so maybe there is a Mizrahi ancestry in there somewhere, but we still get this confidence level as well here, and it doesn't change the percentages. It's only changing those genetic groups, which are all listed right here. And so you can kind of see as you get higher and higher in confidence, gets less. So now I got to reset, and we're going to look at the MyHeritage test I actually took. So we've just been looking at the family tree DNA upload. So let's see what is the difference. So having the 2.5 version, let's see that change. So we can see it's actually a pretty interesting change. So here we have 52.5% Ashkenazi Jewish, and this is the low region, but still percentages are staying the same when I move it. 52.5% Ashkenazi Jewish, Poland, Hungary, Romania, Czechia. Then we have 46.4% Ashkenazi Jewish, USSR, and then only 1.1% Ashkenazi Jewish for Germany, France, Netherlands. Then for the genetic groups, we're getting Poland, Ukraine, Russia, and Romania, Poland, Hungary, Germany, and Austria, and then a whole bunch of other stuff. And once again, they're all kind of just overlapping each other. The only one that really stood out to me was this one, the Netherlands, Germany, and England, where that's probably representing that Dutch Jewish ancestry I have. But everything else is kind of just that generic kind of covering Central, Eastern, and Western Europe. So still not really getting much of anything, but let's look at what the version 0.95 was for this, the original. And it's pretty similar to what the family tree DNA upload is. 85.8%, 8.1% Sephardic Jewish, and then 6.1% Mizrahi. So a little bit less Sephardic, a little more on the Ashkenazi, a little more on the Mizrahi. But in terms of trying to figure out your actual ancestry using this, it's just the same sort of thing. Like, even though there are changes between all of them, between the family tree DNA upload to MyHeritage, between the MyHeritage DNA tests, and the different versions don't tell any sort of story that's really that much difference other than the Mizrahi and the Sephardic Jewish, if I didn't know anything. Knowing that I do have Sephardic Jewish, it's like, okay, that makes sense, that's lining up. But then the Mizrahi, it's like, where's that coming from? Maybe it is an actual thing. And for a lot of you wondering, well, why is there a difference between the test that you took with MyHeritage and the one you uploaded to MyHeritage? And the reason for that is because all of these different companies are testing largely the same DNA, but not all of the same DNA. So they test about 700,000 SNP markers, or what's known as a single nucleotide polymorphism. And that's just a fancy word for a specific spot on your genome. But even though they're all testing about 700,000 of these SNPs, each company is testing some unique ones. So you might have maybe 500 or 600,000 that are the same between all of the companies. And that's not an exact number. That's just kind of a general out of the air number to give as an example. And then maybe out of all of the rest of the SNPs, each company has ones that only they test. Then there are some that maybe only 2 or 3 of the companies test, but it's going to be kind of a hodgepodge. And that's why you get this difference when you've done a test through a company and you upload to that same company having tested elsewhere. But as we can see with the results, doing that doesn't add anything other than more confusion. And really, it just comes down to the DNA matches that's going to be the most helpful in truly finding our actual ancestry. But now that we've looked at this, let's look at some of my other DNA test results with 23andMe and Family Tree DNA. So here we have my 23andMe results, and we can see right off the bat, my Ashkenazi Jewish 94.5% is actually pretty spot on, because we had 87.75% being Eastern European, and then about 5% that is the Dutch Ashkenazi. So about 90-something percent, 92-ish percent. So this is a little higher than what I would typically expect, but that's lining up pretty well. And the other stuff actually correlates to what we would think of in terms of where did the Sephardic Jews go. So we have Spain and Portugal, 3.4%, which makes a lot of sense. 0.3% for Italian and 0.4% for broadly Southern European. And then we have a 0.7% broadly European as well. And then a 0.7% Western Asian and North African, with that breakdown being Arab, Egyptian, and Levantine, and all of that being broken down into Egyptian. So basically 0.7% Egyptian. And lastly, here's my family tree DNA results, with 99% being Ashkenazi Jewish and less than 1% Southern Caucasus, which we can see here, the Southern Caucasus basically covering Georgia. And then this is just covering a lot of what we typically see with the Pale of Settlement, and maybe a little bit more westward than that as well. Now, Family Tree DNA does have Sephardic Jewish readings in theirs, but they haven't done an update in a while. I can't remember when version 3 came out, but it's been a while. And I know that there's been a lot of people like myself with Sephardic ancestry who don't find that it's being read often on Family Tree DNA what we would expect. But that seems to also be a commonality amongst all of these other companies as well. So in my personal experience, I didn't find the new MyHeritage update to be anything to really write home about, for me at least. I have seen a lot of people saying that they do find that it is better. The few polls that I've ran, and then when I did a live stream about the MyHeritage updates, it seemed largely people were positive in terms of the comparison from their old results to the new results. But one of the things that I really noticed about that was it seemed to also largely be a lot of people from Northwestern Europe. So I get the feeling that MyHeritage probably invested a lot of their energy in improving that Northwestern European population breakdown, and especially adding a lot of stuff that wasn't there before. Like Dutch was not something that they defined before, that would just get lumped into other stuff, but now it's defined, and a lot of people who have Dutch ancestry are getting that as a reading. So the biggest takeaway here is that the admixtures can be fun. They can give you a general idea of your ancestry, a very broad brushstroke that doesn't really tell you too many details, but maybe just enough for someone who doesn't know anything about their ancestry to get an idea of something and a place to start. But really the power of these DNA tests is those DNA matches and utilizing your DNA matches to actually build out your family tree. And I know people love these admixtures. They are a lot of fun. It's a very easy way to be like, oh, what's your background? But it doesn't tell the full story. And for people that truly want to know their background, I highly urge you to learn about how to go into your DNA matches to use them to expand your family tree and just general genealogy, because I think a lot of people don't realize how easy it is these days to build a really expansive family tree with just a few clicks, no memberships that you have to pay for, and you can find the real stories, not just, oh, Italian, oh, French, oh, Dutch. Instead, oh, my third great-grandfather who lived in Livorno, Italy, and did this there, and then his parents, and that, the stories. That's the best part. And these DNA tests can do that, but these admixture parts, they're not going to. If you enjoyed watching this video and you'd like to see more, be sure to check out this other video of mine right here. Thank you to my Patreon patrons and YouTube members.